While we were on the air here in Severe Weather Center 9 bringing you the hurricane information at home, our crews were out in the hurricanes themselves, out in the elements, getting the stories. Let's take a look back now at their most memorable moments.
First of all, getting around Punta Gorda, which was one of the cities that was really hit hard, was you didn't know where you were at any time because all the street signs were down. So luckily we had GPS, so we always knew what street we were on. However, everything was just flattened. It was the second day we were in Punta Gorda. It was an elderly couple across the street who were in the 70s.
And their house wasn't just flattened, it was flattened and tilted to the side.
And they had been staying in their home for like 3 or 4 days.
All they did for the storm was they drove away, and once the storm passed, they drove back, and they refused to leave their house. They even slept in their car that night, and then they slept in their home the next night. We asked them, you know, how are you? What's going on? Are you okay?
It's hard. It gets harder now than what it did at first, because at first it was all excitement.
And you would walk in the house, it would just squelch. And, you know, tried to get them to get out of there, but they refused.
They wouldn't leave their home because they were afraid what was left was going to get taken.
They were like, we're going to stay here until we get some help. One of the touching moments when we met this family was that they had no way of communicating with their extended family.
We had asked them if they had spoken to their loved ones yet, because of course, it's the first thing you think of, does your family know you're okay? And the lady just looked at us and said, no, we don't have a phone. We don't have a way to talk to them.
So we gave them our cell phones, and just tears of joy came to this wife.
She was really strong and resilient, but as soon as she heard her sister,
We're all right.
her eyes started filling up with tears.
It was just like real touching.
I'd do anything for that cat.
Kitty, 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 kitty.
There's a woman who's cleaning up her house, and we just walk up to her, how you doing, everything okay? Yes. And she said, you can't believe what happened to me. We said, what? She said, during the middle of the storm, my cat got excited, jumped up on the window ledge, and got pulled out of the window.
He just went up in the air. I mean, he was gone.
2 days later, the cat came 3 in the morning, meowing at our front door.
I came out with my flashlight, and there he sat. And I opened the door, and I said, cat, cat. And he just jumped right up my chest.
And the cat had found its way back home. You know, they say that about the cats and animals, that they can always find their way back home. And he found his way back home, and her reaction and her joy, you know, she didn't care about her house anymore, but she had her cat, whose name was Cat Cat. And Cat Cat found his way back home, so that was kind of a nice story we found.
This video was captured this morning about 6:25 a.m. Central Time today, August 12th, of Hurricane Charlie as it continues to strengthen south of Cuba on a course that could make landfall around the Tampa Bay area late tomorrow or Saturday.
I remember sitting in the meeting that Wednesday and them saying, we have a hurricane coming, and they said, George, why don't you go? I said, okay, let's go. Went to Tampa when Charlie was going to hit Tampa. Went to Sarasota when Charlie was going to hit Sarasota. Then went back up to Tampa when Charlie was going to hit back in Tampa. They said, Charlie's going to actually not hit Tampa. It's going to go right through Central Florida. So we packed up and we left. Well, everyone else had left before us. So the roads were empty. They were afraid that the bay was going to get flooded. So everyone left Tampa to go to Orlando thinking they were escaping Charlie. Well, they ended up being in the middle of Charlie. The funny story was in Tampa one morning. It was a day and a half away, Charlie was, and we thought, all right, we're going to go out there and tell people what's happening and tell people what to expect. And all of a sudden, we're out there at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and it starts to rain, and the wind kicks up. We're right by the bay. Lights start falling on me.
If the wind gusts get too big, light!
It was very frightening, and I thought, this is it, this is it. Sure enough, it didn't come for another day and a half later, but one of the squall lines or one of the wind gusts, it hit the entire crew, and we all thought, this is it. Here comes the big one. My news director called and said, you know what we should do? We should do some reports in Spanish. I said, absolutely. We have a huge Spanish population. Let's go ahead and inform people.
Ahora para nuestros televidentes en español, un breve informativo.
To this day, people in supermarkets, when I'm out on stories, they come up to me and they say, you were the guy who did that stuff in Spanish, the reports for Francis. And I said, yeah, I thought it was a good idea. And they said, so did we. We were getting ready for Francis. I was doing reports at little East Lake Toho in St. Cloud. And I was there for a while, so then this group came up, and in this group was a kid. So he says to me, he goes, I have something for you. And he gave me a button, and the button said, Francis for President. And I thought, wow, that was pretty ingenious, so I kept it. And I still have the Francis for President buttons. Before we were going to cover the hurricanes, I think the first time we had our packages with our food and our chips and our granola bars and our protein bars, and it was great. It was fantastic. By the third hurricane, you were tired of eating granola bars and fruit and protein bars. I'd rather just not eat. But we had the granola bars and we ate, and it was like we were on a deserted island with this like bag of granola bars, and we would have to like barter. Like, all right, I'm gonna take a nap. Well, if you want to take a nap, I'll have to get a granola bar. And it was like a back and forth because all you had to eat were dried fruit and granola bars, to the point where I don't think I've had a granola bar since Hurricane Jean. I just can't do it.
Charlie was the first storm, and it had been advertised as a storm that was going to hit Tampa. You know, Tampa, 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 Tampa. And I was out in the studio, we were on the air, and Tom said, you know, he pulled me aside and he said, Bob, this has made a turn. And I said, Tom, please explain to me what. And we walked over to the weather computer, and it was not just an hourly move, it was a move that was sustained over a period of a couple of hours. And he said, I think the storm is coming here. He said, in fact, rather than going to Tampa, I think it's going to come right up to Central Florida and go through Orlando and up through Jacksonville. And I said, Tom, are you sure? And he said, I'm very sure. And I said, Tom, then that's what we'll report.
We gave you the first warning on this. The storm's expected to make landfall in about another hour just north of Fort Myers, track its way up 75 through Polk County and eventually right in toward the heart of downtown Orlando.
I was very pleased that we were able to get the word out quickly and repeatedly. I've been in television news for 35 years, and I've had an opportunity to cover a lot of spot news stories, which is get your juices flowing, but never anything like this. 3 back-to-back hurricanes over a 6-week period. We were either preparing for one, in immediate recovery from a hurricane, and then it was preparation for the next one. It was unprecedented. It turned out to be a marathon for the station, the people and the station's equipment. Our live trucks are, quite candidly, gas hogs, and we have live trucks all over Central Florida, and they're starting to run out of gasoline. And we can't buy gasoline, so we got gas locally, and we filled up these big, jerry cans, I guess you call them, and Dave Cyrak and I, the news operations manager, threw them in the trunk of my car, and we drove over to Brevard and way down to South Brevard, and what should have been maybe a 150-mile trip, because of all the roads that were blocked, trees down, power lines that were down, to hit 2 or 3 of our live trucks, we had to drive 300 miles. And so when we came back to Orlando that night, my car was out of gas, but we were able to gas up the live trucks. I'll remember that for a long time.
I get the call around 10:30, pack your bags, going for a couple of days, don't know when you're coming back. Dane calls me up, did you hear we're going down south to the coast because hurricane's coming. Never covered a hurricane in my life, never even seen one on TV. So I come from the Midwest, and it's just like, never hear of those. So I was like, yeah, great, let's go cover some wind and rain.
And we went, and this was several days before the hurricane hit, and we were covering, the preparations, the evacuations, and so forth, the actual day of the hurricane.
It was Friday the 13th. I'll never forget that date. And we were in a hotel, and we felt we were pretty much safe there, right? Because, it's a 2-story building.
What was interesting to me about that whole situation is at that hotel where we were at, it was not on the beach, it was on the intercoastal, it's inland, at least none of the Barrier Islands. And that hotel was an evacuation hotel. They had actually brought people from the Barrier Islands like Sanibel, Fort Myers Beach to that hotel to evacuate them there. So basically within a couple of hours before the hurricane Charlie hits there, police come by.
So did you get the message about mandatory evacuation?
And they're going around saying everybody's got to leave. Like kind of frantic, very nervous kind of, we got to get people out of here.
Shelters don't take dogs.
And a lot of these people did not want to go. They're like, come on, we've already been evacuated this hotel. A lot of them wanted to stay. In fact, I remember police actually telling one man, if you don't leave, you'll be arrested. Because those people at that point did not know the hurricane was making that turn. We had heard Tampa all along. And when we were in the field, we actually didn't know that as well. Because we're in the field, we're not really seeing the reports everyone else is seeing on TV. So we didn't even know it was basically coming right for us as well. Right after those evacuations, I did get a page from our news desk saying, Charlie's now a Category 4. And after they evacuated that hotel, that is when I knew it's coming here.
When they started evacuating our hotel, and the manager comes and gives the TV crew a key and pretty much tells you, you guys are on your own, here's a key. And every fire department, police department kind of tells you, you're also on your own. And at 2 o'clock, that's when it started hitting.
At one point, we were there with another crew, another TV crew, actually one from Tampa, where that reporter, I remember him saying he had been in Andrew and he just knew that it was time to get inside. We got to get inside. And at that point, it was a real scary situation.
And I remember the reporter clearly, just like a tape playing in my head, saying, we got 5 minutes before it hits the fan. And we started running, and when I started running, the wind was picking me up and it kind of just yanked the camera all over the place.
The way I describe it is it was like when we actually got inside, it was like somebody turned on a switch and it just went nuts. It was like from one extreme to the next, just like that. We got back to the hotel, ready to get inside, and then the roof starts coming off.
It's scary once you kind of sit there, and we were in the hotel, and I sat in the bed and I was looking out the window and I was just seeing trees fly. And I wasn't even shooting because I was like, for a moment I had to sit down and say, okay, I got about 30 minutes before we start flying too. So it was very scary.
One of the scenarios that we were working on, we went out back and I was doing a stand-up. I was going to get on camera, talk in front of the camera, do a live show and tell stand-up.
Take a look as the wind is whipping through Port Charlotte here.
What you don't realize that it's not just the wind that you got to be careful, it's all the debris. And it occurred to me when we're under this porch and I'm sitting there and the building's shaking. I mean, we got a 2-story hotel and it's just shaking. You're under the porch and you're shooting the B-roll, and all of a sudden half of the roof just flies off. I'm not talking about a house roof, I'm talking about half of the hotel roof.
Lands about 20 feet from us, like over the top of us.
Just flies over, hits the water, and makes like the biggest splash I ever seen. I was so scared that I was yanked up like this. I was not rolling at the time, but when the building shook, I hit the record button out of nowhere, just instincts, and I got the roof flying over my head, and I see Dane real frightened looking at me. Are you all right, man? Are you all right? And I'm like, yeah. But then his reporter instincts came along and they're like, did you get the shot? Did you get the shot? I'm like, yeah, I think I did. Other than I was fearing for my life, I think I was.
That's when we knew we had to get inside.
I thought we were the only crews out there, just TV crews. And when we go up to the second story, there's all these construction guys that are going to repair the city after it's all blown apart. And they start freaking out and coming out of their hotel rooms.
One of those workers in his room is where the roof came off as he was inside the room, standing there.
And then when I see them, I kind of, I was like, if these guys are freaking out, I better start freaking out too at one point. And we were walking down the hallway.
It's something like I've never experienced in my life. The ceiling tiles, the ceiling up top was going up and down and shaking.
Oh man, this roof is history.
And the building was kind of shaking. And at this point, we're on the second floor. It was so extreme at that point that, I mean, literally, just my life flashed before my eyes, because I thought at that point, we got to get off of this second floor. This entire building's just going to go down. And I actually envisioned like seeing us at the bottom of this building, the rubble of this building, if we didn't get off there. And initially we went to the second floor because there was concern with storm surge coming into the first floor. But Charlie moved so fast, that storm surge didn't come up as bad as expected. It wasn't really just the wind and the rain and how bad it was, but that was at least 145-mile-an-hour winds. But what was so bad about that was just what you heard outside. Debris flying, glass breaking, just everything hitting the building. It was just so much noise with the debris flying through the air. As I actually heard later on, that hotel we were at was never rebuilt. They basically auctioned it off and got rid of that hotel. That's how bad the damage was there.
I think probably doing hurricane coverage, and for a lot of people, anybody in this business or public safety people.
Unfortunately, that serious situation has progressively grown worse.
The hardest part of doing it is knowing that your family's at home and you're not there.
I remember distinctly, from where we were, our vantage point, we could see the beach clearly, see the lights of the beach, and we could see the lights of the city. Look left is the city, look right is the beach, and you could watch down the line, you could see the transformers exploding. It was like fireworks, these blue lights just going down, then all of a sudden everything was dark. My photographer, Lou Bonnell, he's been working in the market for 30 years, so we were planning. We had locations, safe locations where we were. We had fallback positions when the storms hit. We were prepared for this hurricane. We found a niche in a bunker. It was an old firehouse, a pre-World War II firehouse, so it was just a big slab of concrete, certainly a safe position, had a niche cut out in it. Lou picked this out for a reason, because he could stand in the niche, and he was bone dry through Francis, and here I was standing out in the driving range for about 16 hours. It just won't stop out here. So that just shows you the wily veteran versus the green reporter out there. Francis was a monster, and it was just incredible to cover it for so many hours, and then leave for a few hours and come back, and it's like the same 70-mile-an-hour winds you were standing in before are still blowing. It's amazing. It's 24 hours later, it's 30 hours later, it's 32 hours later. The storm is still going. It would not go away, and my photographer and I were just looking at each other going, oh, when is this going to stop? And you can see the waves out there as you look. They're really 12 hours before Gene came in, these waves started coming and pounding the beach and carrying away all the sand. And there were drop-offs that were taller than I was, where it just would drop off and there'd be no more beach. And I remember we pulled the cables all the way out there to the beach just because we needed to show people who had not been to the beach lately what exactly was going on out there and what they were going to have to deal with for the next years to come. And I remember going out there and during one of my live shots and just walking off the ledge of the beach. But I'm 6 feet tall, and this comes up to about my chest. That's how much. Just because, you know, I wanted to show people that, hey, look, this is gone, and it's going to take a long time to come back. Evacuated area right now, and there's been a lot of people coming.
Right when the storm was coming, I was in Point Siena with my photographer and a whole nother crew and a satellite truck that was going a little bit like this. The wind picked up so severely that you couldn't stand up. It would knock you over. So I said to my photographer, this would be great just to give people the understanding of just how strong this is. You know, and I'm no lightweight. And I went out there. I stepped behind from outside the wall.
It is swirling, so there's no direct direction, but I have a wall blocking me to the side here.
And I could just lean right into the wind, and the whole thing was holding me up, and I couldn't believe it. And I thought, what a visual way to let people know exactly how strong this wind is.
You can see I can actually lean right into the wind. I'm not holding my body up at all. This is all wind holding all of me up, just like that.
One of the more memorable things. My family's house got hit in Hurricane Andrew, so when we saw what happened to these people, talk about it hitting home, I knew, you know, exactly what they were going through. Scary. I had never seen anything like this. There was a marina, and they had floating docks like fingers that would jet out from the marina, and it's supposed to rise and fall with the tide, so it's supposed to be very safe, but it couldn't handle Hurricane Francis.
When Francis came, she threw the docks over here inland. You can see them right here. They're made up of concrete and floats here, and as the docks got pushed this way, so did the boats.
And all the fingers where the docks were and the boats toppled one on top of the other. And the whole thing, all these boats just one on top of the other. And we were out there as people were going to their boats for the first time and seeing the devastation. That was an incredible sight.
Our number one goal, and this staff, reporters, the Simon desk, everybody and producers really rose to the occasion, working hard, working the phones, getting people in to get out the information. The control room is chaotic. It's a live show, and when you're in continuous coverage, there's so much, I mean, it's bedlam, but it's amazing how it gets on the air.
Before any big story, 9/11, when the day that happened, the brush fires, the tornadoes, the hurricanes, I pray. And I take a few minutes and I pray, and I pray for our wisdom, and I pray that we don't put people in danger and that we give them the right information. I prayed a lot this summer because it was happening over and over and over again. I worried about my house, I worried about my family because they're all over Florida. It was a tough summer, but every time when we got letters from people who thanked us for saving their lives, it made up for it. made a lot of difference. There was a point during Charlie, the first storm that we had, that the producer wanted to go back to some live shots, and Charlie was about to hit us hard.
This is an Andrew strength storm, okay?
And I looked at her and I said, don't go anywhere but go to Tom Terry. And I said, everybody stay on Tom Terry. All I want to hear is Tom Terry for the next hour. And that's what we did. And it just let it breathe because he was going through town by town, city by city.
Kissimmee, you're coming up. 8:30.
We knew exactly. We could hear it outside the control room. And the lights flickered a couple times and we knew it was right on top of us. There was this camaraderie in the newsroom.
The wind's at 67 miles per hour. Tim, how you holding up?
Is that all? 67? It feels like a lot more out here. This is incredible. The winds have really picked up.
Probably a good sign that hopefully these winds are not going to wear the area down, although they appear to have wore me down at this point.
After Francis, we're tired, we're still doing it. After Gene, it was like, oh, you're kidding? But the bottom line was everyone knew what they had to do, and they didn't stop. Tired, angry, trying to work around your house, trying to get stuff done in the newsroom. It didn't matter. It was all about making sure everybody in Central Florida knew what was going on.
We started with a plan that Charlie was coming but going to hit Tampa. When it shifted, you had to move everybody, knowing, okay, you're in this location for the storm hitting, and then you switch gears to power, you switch gears to water. It was easy because we told everybody where they were going, who they were working with, so we just had to switch location. These 3 hurricanes back to back were unbelievable. Nobody ever expected them to come and hit us 3 times. And everybody came together like it was nothing. They were willing to do whatever, whenever, wherever they needed to go. We had a job to do. We needed to tell everybody what they could do, what they needed. They were losing their homes. People here were losing their homes, but we're still willing, ready to work, ready to do whatever they needed to do. It was truly unbelievable.
The glass on the live trucks takes the brunt of it. And just how you would board up your houses and board up, your buildings, you can't do anything about the vehicle. It's going to be just taking hits for hours and hours on the front line of the storm.
That hit our van.
So we lost a couple of windshields.
Windows are gone. Smashed out, debris that came flying through here.
We lost a lot of doors that would bend backwards on the cars. And now that when that happens, you're bringing water at hurricane force winds into the vehicle. And so now your crews no longer have a dry, secure place to work from. We did some things where we had some great help from our Cox partner, Mannheim Auction, where they actually fixed a windshield on a vehicle during a hurricane. And the windshield obviously was parked. When the windshield broke, water was coming in straight to the truck, and the damage is just taking in that water, soaking it up like a sponge. But they were able to help us by putting a windshield on during a hurricane.
The viewer calls were non-stop, basically 24 hours a day, as soon as we were in a hurricane warning situation. People were frightened, they didn't know what to do, lots of questions about, do I tape my windows, do I open my window a crack? Some people were just lonely, they were tired, they were scared, they were frightened, they wanted somebody to talk to, and we had somebody there to talk to them, to calm them, to keep them calm. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback from people I see on the street.
This is what Joy Bell's old waterfront home used to look like, and this is what's left of it. Really nothing, just the pilings and foundation, everything else gone, and that's what folks here say they're dealing with. A lot of people there were almost complacent. So when Ivan hit, it was awful because people died, a lot more than we saw here on the East Coast.
I've ridden out many a storm in that house, and I said, oh, we don't need to leave. And a lot of people felt that way, and they're all in Grand Lagoon dead right now.
It was very sad to watch because we especially saw roof damage here. There we would see homes that were wiped completely to the slate. I mean, these are nice new homes, and they were gone. And I think a lot of people had trouble dealing with the reality of that. We interviewed a couple of people who said, you need to tell people this wasn't a Category 3.
This was a Category 4 or a Category 5. This is not a 3, and I want the public to know that. And, it wasn't. It was a 5, and, my stuff is like way over there.
And they refused to believe that it was a Category 3 because it was so severe and the damage was so bad that they were almost offended that people labeled it a Category 3. They thought this is a 4, this is a 5, but either way people need to know how bad it was.
My husband said we'd invite you in, but let's go. There's not much for you.
Remember when the president came to visit after that, it was interesting how much his visit meant to people because they had lost everything. They really had nothing to bank on, and while they knew eventually insurance would cover it, they'd be getting their payments, I watched grown men cry because they had nothing else at that point except a handshake from a president.
I shook his hand twice, and that is a defining moment in my life, and I get very emotional when I think about that. It's just more than I can say. It's great, just great.
And Bill Kuntz was his name, a man who had moved over to the waterfront because he wanted so desperately to live near the water. He'd moved from Tennessee. And he'd lived there a while, had a house that he really loved, had a boat, was very content, he and the wife, and he had sent the wife inland to be away from the storm. And when the storm passed...
Yeah, I got to crawl under the trees and negotiate all the down houses in the front yard.
His home was gone. I mean, it was just completely destroyed.
And I got a sailboat in the backyard. Not mine, though.
And he remembered saying that he didn't want his wife to come back and see it because he knew how upset she would be. So he surveyed the damage himself and decided he wasn't ever going to let her see it. And it just shows that while we can see all the pictures on TV and we can bring it to the viewer, it's tough to comprehend unless you're one of those people. And always remember how genuine Bill was in his desire to protect his own wife from seeing how upsetting a storm could be to your livelihood.
You know, in Brevard County, we saw all the downed trees in Orlando and Seminole and Orange County, and it really didn't strike us immediately as such a big disaster until you drive in on the 408 and you see how many trees came down and how many roads were blocked and how hard it was to get from one place to the other. Francis, we knew, was coming in toward the southern end of the county. We figured that if any place was going to suffer some of the most horrific damage, it was probably going to be Barefoot Bay. There are thousands of mobile homes. During the storm, we actually drove through Barefoot Bay a couple of times, and we got to see the progression of the homes. You know, it started with awnings and carports, and next thing you know, roofs were being ripped off. Every time we'd go back, something worse would have happened to some of these homes there. The funny thing was there were a lot of people that actually, even despite the evacuation orders, were going back into Barefoot Bay to check for themselves to see if their homes were okay.
And there are a number of people who are not heeding the advice of the emergency management, and they're heading back into their neighborhoods after they were evacuated. That's the Barefoot Bay community down there.
A lot of people left, but they wanted to see whether they were doing okay or whether their homes were okay. And there actually were a number of people that stayed in their homes despite all the warnings. They stayed in their homes, and the fire department had to go in the middle of the hurricane and help these people out. After Francis, it was just a big mess, and people started to clean up. And it really, I don't think they really got a chance to clean up because of what happened, you know, just a couple weeks later with Jean. We were watching one hotel that had a tarp pretty much over the whole hotel roof, and by the end of Jean, that tarp was gone. The initial day after was probably one of the most incredible sights. Just to drive down A1A and to see how much damage was done to these large hotels. The Radisson, which you could see through the walls from one side of the hotel out to the ocean, was just unbelievable. The wind had that much force to peel the plaster and all of the building materials away so that you could see right through the hotel. There are so many people out there that lost everything in these storms. They'd go to the shelters and they'd come back and all they would find is a pile of rubble.
We're driving to Brevard, driving straight into the storm, and and the storm's coming straight at us. There was nobody on the road, and we were driving pretty slow. We left about 2 o'clock. And the one thing you could see as you got closer when we were on I-95 is you see this little blue glow, little blast of blue light, and we kind of figured that was probably the transformers exploding. It's pitch black out, and I kind of had an idea where I was at, and I was like, God, this is Babcock and 192. I go, there should be a stoplight, and so I just go ahead and stop on my brake right then. This stoplight comes swinging. The road was washed away in some spots, US 1. There was a hotel that its complete second story had blown off into outer buildings behind there and trapped 3 women the night before, older women, and and some construction workers in the middle of the night had told us about how they, in pitch darkness, heard the screams back there, got these ladies out. One lady didn't even have shoes, and one of these guys gave his own shoes to this lady, and they got him back into a safer part of the hotel.
And Francis just would not quit. We were driving around in southern Osceola County, Yeehaw Junction in particular. I just remember thinking, how are these people going to make it? There was no power, there was no water because they had well pumps that couldn't run without electricity. There was no phone service, there was no cell phone service. I mean, these people were literally cut off from the world. And finally, you started to see some ice arrive and some supplies, but these mobile homes just couldn't withstand the force of the wind that went through that area, and they were just ripped to shreds. And these people just were hopeless, but they all stuck with each other and said, we're going to rebuild, we're going to stay here, we're going to make this happen. The big threat the next day was those tornadoes. I was talking with the producers back at the station, and they were saying, you need to be on the lookout for tornadoes, you need to watch for rotation in the clouds and that sort of thing. And we kind of had this moment. We were driving down 192 from Kissimmee to St. Cloud, and I was looking up out the window, and I looked at the clouds, and I could actually see the clouds rotating right in front of me. And so I called into the station, and I said, hey, we're listening to Tom Terry on the radio. He's talking about this rotation in the clouds. I'm looking at it as he's saying it. So we called in, and we were kind of doing a talk back with Tom, and he said, do me a favor, turn around and look behind you. And I said, behind me? And he said, yeah, look back toward Kissimmee. And I rolled down the window and I stuck my head out and I looked back toward Kissimmee, and I couldn't believe how dark the sky was. I don't think I've seen a sky that dark in my life. After Francis, we were down in Kissimmee doing a story with an older couple who had lived their entire lives in this house. And the house was just ripped apart. I mean, the roof had collapsed. Their drywall was all rotted and moldy. And this couple was having trouble getting contractors and getting help to repair their home. And they actually decided, you know what, we're not going to sit here, we're not going to wait, we know there are more storms coming, we're going to do this ourselves. And this couple, literally, to watch them with their bare hands and, with little hammers and other tools, just pulling apart this house that they had built their entire lives in, it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to watch, but to know that they had this resolve and this drive to get their lives back to normal was inspiring. They just weren't going to let this get them down. And I think those kind of stories are what keeps you going when you're covering hour after hour of just destruction.
Good luck. God bless you.
This summer really showed the strength of the people of Central Florida. With Jean, it started to rain early. And I say that because it ended up, at first it wasn't that severe. We were, out of the truck, in the truck, out of the truck, in the truck. And it was fine. And I was saying, oh, well, Lake County must not be getting that much of it. And then it came, and we were really surprised with how much weather we got inland in Lake County. We actually moved our location to upwind of the mobile home park because we stood at the top of it and watched as the roofs came peeling off and the wind just took these metal plates and aluminum siding and it just flew. At one point we were standing there talking live and oh, there goes another one down over the live truck. We just noticed this, like a deck of cards, these metal plates just flew off of this roof and into a lake nearby.
The funniest part of the whole hurricane season for us in the sports department, I thought, was that when the first one came, we weren't really involved in it. Like, it was kind of the aftermath. They would say, hey, we're the sports guys. There's a tree limb down on Summerlin. Can you guys go, shoot that and take care of that? But as it got more serious, as the hurricane started coming, we had to pull everybody in for help. And we actually went out to the coast, which was a big surprise for me. We came in at, I believe, about 3 o'clock in the morning. And the winds were still 90, 95 close to the coast. And I'm driving with photographer Willie Dixon, and he's going literally, and normally I yell at guys for not driving fast enough. Willie's going literally 5 miles an hour over the intercoastal bridge. And I was so scared that I rolled down my window in case we got blown off so I could jump out of the car. I mean, that was how scared I was, because initially when you're back here and you're watching it on TV and you see everybody getting blown around, it's not that bad. But once you get into it yourself and you're just getting pummeled, that's when it's a little bit scary. There were houses literally ripped in half by the erosion on the beach, and that's what amazed me more than anything else. You would see people just kind of checking things out like you were, you know, walking around the neighborhood and kind of camping out. You know, the big thing was hurricane parties. So every now and then, especially at night, you would run across a few places on the coast where guys were hunkered down, as Tom Terry likes to say, and hadn't gone anywhere and were having these hurricane parties.
And we went out to Lake County on after one of the storms, and one of the most visual things I saw was this huge, probably 100-foot tall oak tree that was split in half.
Take a look as I nearly fall into the middle of this tree.
Half the tree was covering the street. The other half was on some poor individual's house. And it just split the house open, and you look at this person and their lives are shattered. Everything they had was destroyed by the water or blown away by the wind. And you just feel so sorry for these individuals. And I remember somebody asking me, how can you stay up for 24, 27, 30 hours and be out there in these conditions? And well, the adrenaline, but B, you feel for these people.
I've been leery of a home like this, but just me.
You go out there and they have lost everything. I didn't meet, fortunately, anybody that had lost a family member, but anything of personal gain was just wiped out. And it was tough to see. It was just pretty painful.
It's sad.
Some of the elderly people that live in these communities were just, just distraught. They were devastated. Things that they have worked their whole lives to, build up in retirement and save and have a comfortable life here in Orlando, just kind of retire under the sun, was just gone just like that.
Francis, we lucked upon this location where we could just stay live through the whole storm. You knew that there was this long 24 hours of hurricane wind coming at you. We were going to ride it out right on the north side of the eye wall. And we found this, this fantastic campus. It was the Brevard Community College Palm Bay campus, and we basically just took the place over. We just pulled our trucks in, hid it behind a wall, and we were in this sort of patio area where we could be protected around a corner, but at the same time we could walk right out into the storm, and the winds were just incredible. I can't even imagine what that big yellow band that is still headed in this direction is going to be like. We're going up to the third floor of this this building here. We were able to run our cables and climb all over this building and give the viewers all this perspective of what's going on around us. And it was a good feeling. It was exhilarating. At the same time, you're afraid. You're like, when is some piece of sheet metal going to come flying across the way? The difference with Gene was people didn't take it as seriously. Either they were hardened or they were weary. It's hard to tell. In any case, I think that kind of Brevard County area that had been hit so hard by Francis, a lot of people decided that they were just going to stay home. Their house made it through the first one, so they're going to stay with their house because it's going to make it through a second one. So we ended up trying to go to this family we knew was going to ride the storm out. They had everything boarded up, and they were right along the Indian River, and the winds outside were howling. We were interviewing them, and as the night progressed, the winds got so bad we actually couldn't leave. We sort of got stranded at this house. And Corey, my photographer, and I were inside rolling tape, and all of a sudden, just crashing outside the house. You didn't know what was going on. It seemed like the house was falling apart. We were all frightened. We all went into this kind of hallway area that they had built with pillows and couch cushions in case a tornado came along or in case the house fell apart. And you had no idea what was happening. Then we realized that the roof of the house was coming up. The ceiling tiles started to fall in. And we were all terrified. We thought any second now, this roof is going to come flying right off, and what's going to happen to us? How are we going to survive? And I was on the phone with Tom Terry saying, Tom, how much longer? And I was on the phone, I think Joe had taken over at that point. How much longer do we have? And 4 hours, 5 hours. And the feeling is like, how can you, we're not going to make it 5 more hours. We are not going to make it 5 more hours. In the middle of all this chaos, we actually fell asleep. Woke up to daylight and walked outside only to realize the house right next door had been demolished, completely demolished. And all of that noise, most of that pounding on the house was the sound of that house falling apart and the wind blowing it against the house that we were in. And you looked at the house next door and said, could have been us. Everyone in that house said, it could have been us. We never should have been here. Now, when the storm surge comes along, it's going to be much worse than this. Consider that the storm surge at 15 feet. It was the Dolphin Club condominiums. A few days earlier, I had done this stand-up about the storm surge coming in and what it would do, and we panned the camera up and we got a shot of that building. We went back a few days later and I did the same stand-up, only this time the whole front of the building had been sheared away and the top of the thing was completely gone, and it really gave you the sense of how much the hurricanes changed life everywhere.
It was amazing to me to see the ocean in that state, and I can remember it so vividly. The waves were furious.
Look out there at the ocean. It just looks unbelievable.
And at high tide, at the worst of the storm, they were just, coming up so close. You couldn't look in the direction of the ocean much of the time because the winds were so intense, and you didn't just have the rain, which obviously is pelting against your face, and I'm sure other people have described felt like, pins and needles. But you also had the sand, and you could taste the salt water. I think one of the scariest things was all of the windows were taped, and we kept saying, wow, the wind's 65, 70 miles per hour, and so far, we didn't see much in the way of damage. We're getting ready to do a live shot, and we've got probably 30 seconds, and our plan is to walk down the steps because at that point the winds weren't as bad. Everything depended upon, how bad it felt at the moment. Like 30 seconds before, we hear this massive crash, and it was the window right in the area we were going to walk by that had just smashed and shattered into a million pieces. And, we both took a second and thought, okay, we're okay. I mean, there are a couple of moments where you're grabbing onto each other and you're making sure the other person is okay. You look out for each other. When the winds calmed down a little bit, we were able to go out to the ocean and eventually give people that view of the erosion that took place. Huge chunk of sand, 5 to 6 feet just eaten away by Jean.
And you see the chunk there, taken right out of the sand.
That was unbelievable. It really was like you were standing on top of a rock formation and you looked down, it was like a cliff almost.
Sometimes, struggling to come up with stuff to talk about it. At one point I remember talking about like frogs that had gathered in the crevice of a stop sign. The little things you notice during a hurricane, there must have been 10 dozen frogs. We were in the Barefoot Bay area, so very southern Brevard County, pretty close to where the eye of the storm, maybe 30 miles north of where the eye of the storm came forward, and the Barefoot Bay community I think was the most memorable. You can imagine this was a pretty idyllic place to live at one point. I mean, it was clearly inexpensive, it was right on the water in Florida, and then all of a sudden a hurricane comes along and it becomes just about the worst place in the world to be. You could see people's living rooms out there, their couch, their photo albums, their pictures, grandkids' artwork, all just out there for everybody to see, and in some cases still being rained on. I'm Channel 9's Josh Wilson in Go Naive, Haiti. We made a trip to Go Naive, Haiti.
Most of these families down here have very little anyway, and so this is kind of pushing them right over the edge.
Then came back to cover Jean. To me, one of the lessons there was no matter how horrible it is here in the United States, help is on the way. Somebody's going to set up an ice station at the fire station a couple blocks from your house. Somebody's going to bring clean drinking water.
Need water, sir?
There'll be hundreds of power crews here trying to restore power, but in other places in the world and not too far away from where we live, there's nobody coming to help.
Backseat.
The week after, I went to one of the fire stations and they were bringing water and ice for people. The county fire chief walked up to me and thanked me because Channel 9 had warned Orange County that the hurricane was headed right for Orange County. And he said that the reason they were prepared for it and were able to send people home early from work and get ready for this was because of us. And I think that was one of the proudest professional moments I've had. The day after Francis, I guess we made our way up to the beach. And I figured the worst of the damage, of course, was going to be on the beach side, looking back from the ocean back toward the shore.
The Atlantic Ocean rolled over the beach all the way up over a 15-foot sand dune.
So we started walking along the sand, and Suddenly I looked up and I saw the entire roof and front side of the top floor of this condo completely off. And there were some people up on the top floor looking for what was left, and we started talking to, it was actually the son of one of the owners.
It's total loss up here.
He was just saying his father was going to be heartbroken when he saw the damage there. It was just a surreal sight to see, to be in that apartment on the top floor and have no roof and no front wall.
You got such a giant news operation, so many people doing so many different things. We're going full coverage. Before you come into work, you're running around, freaking out, trying to get plywood up on your walls, trying to get your home stocked, trying to do stuff for yourself, yet you know when the hurricane hits you're not going to be there and you're not going to have a chance to do anything to your house. But again, you're like, you haven't slept for about 3 days up to the hurricane, and then the hurricane comes and you know exactly what you're going to be doing at that point. You can see things are starting to kick up quite a bit here. However, it's 3:30 in the morning. We've got nowhere to go, and we're hunkering down next to a Walmart. So the manager of the Walmart comes out and says, hey, you guys, if you need something, this guy had to stay in the Walmart because they had to have somebody with the store in case of looters. So this guy comes out at 3:30. If there's anything you need, why don't you guys come in here? And we're like, well, we really could use a place to sleep. So he goes, well, come on in. So it's 3:30. Hurricane's just starting to come, but it's not really the worst of it yet. And we're walking through Walmart in our boxer shorts and socks, and he goes, help yourself to whatever you want. So we all split off in our own different direction, and I went right to the sleeping bags. Some of the other ones went and got lawn chairs, and then we took everything back, and we were like, where should we sleep? And he goes, well, why don't you guys, why don't you sleep back in the cafeteria part? I'm like, okay, whatever, it's dark back here. One of the guys slept out in the car. He didn't want to sleep in the Walmart, but 4 of us slept in the Walmart. Josh and Willie fell asleep like within a matter of minutes. I mean, they were out. And I laid there all night. I did not, if I slept 5 minutes, I was lucky. I mean, we were only laying there for maybe 2.5 hours. But I was laying there, and I just kept thinking, you know, what if the roof of this place blows off right now? Is this going to be the end of me in a Walmart with, you know, metal laying on top of me? So I'm laying there on the floor, and I'm trying to figure out, you know, whether I'm going to live through the night. And I'm looking around, and I see these tables everywhere. And I'm like, all right, if it got so bad and I could hear the roof coming off, I bet you I could roll underneath that table and stay underneath the table and perhaps survive. So these are the things that are going through your head as you're trying to get 2 hours rest. I didn't sleep at all. 5 minutes. My photographer, Octavio, he didn't sleep at all either. The next morning, we're exchanging notes of the night, and he's saying the same thing. Oh, I was so scared, I didn't know where I was going to sleep. But Willie slept all night. So did Josh. People were coming up to the live truck and bringing us food. This lady brought us a pizza. This other lady brought us coffee and donuts. I mean, people were really concerned about us being out in the field because they knew that we were going to be out there. Now, we do have all sorts of debris all over the place. We heard a loud crash about 15 minutes ago, and I noticed that one of the palm trees behind us had busted up. And that, I mean, I can't believe that people did that. That was really awesome to know that people appreciated what Channel 9 had done throughout this, enough to go get a pizza and take it to the news guy and the photographer out in their van. And it was awesome. It was the best pizza I ever had.
I had the opportunity after Francis to get into Sky Witness 9 and do an aerial survey of the marketplace. These hurricanes, to think that at many times they were traveling at 3 miles per hour and just staying outside a family's wall of their house, breathing down them at 120 miles per hour, and people inside thinking after hour 5, after hour 6, 8, is this home going to hold together? I'm amazed at how our community held together through these 3 storms that hit us. It's just miraculous that we didn't have more tragedies unfold in the way of human loss. It could have been so much worse.